Thank you, Jerry. That was lovely. Welcome, everyone, to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. We're always glad to be together. My name is Susan MacDonnell, and I'll be the service leader today. Me gustaría practicar mi español hoy. Así que, por favor, perdone cualquier error que pueda cometer. Me llamo Susan MacDonnell y voy a servir como líder de nuestro servicio esta mañana. Bienvenidos a todos. Estamos contentos de estar juntos. This is a place where we can bring our whole selves and be accepted as we are, with or without religious beliefs, with or without status or wealth, and whomever we love. We are welcomed and accepted with love and friendship. Este es un lugar donde podemos aportar todo nuestro ser y ser aceptados tal como somos, con o sin creencias religiosas, con o sin estatus o riqueza, sin importar a quién amemos. Somos bienvenidos y aceptados con amor y amistad. I'll now continue mostly in English, or we'll be here all day. We're happy to welcome Andrea Abbott this morning as our guest speaker and as a retired UU minister. Her message this morning is one of appreciating and valuing differences, a truly essential value that we as Unitarian Universalists endeavor to practice in our own lives. Bienvenido a nuestra orador invitada, Andrea Abbott, ministra jubilada de UU, Universalist. So a few announcements. Diana Akesian, and I haven't seen her yet. Is Diana here? Way in the back. Stand up so people can take a peek. Diana Akesian is here with a memory book for Judy Rosenthal, whose memorial service was this past week. She'll be at a table off to the side after the service if you would like to sign that memory book. And Françoise Yohalam asked me to let everybody know that today in Mexico is Democracy Day, Dia de Democracia. And there will be a gathering that we would be a little late for. It starts at 11 in front of the parroquia. But if you'd like to try to get up there afterwards to join the crowd, please do. After the service, those on Zoom are invited to stay connected and visit with others in the main room for discussion. Those with us today at the Aldea can join us for coffee and cookies. Después del servicio, vamos a ofrecer café y galletas. And I have not received cards for visitors, but we would like to say that if you're here visiting, would you stand if you're willing and able? We'd like to see who you are and hopefully find you during coffee hour to say hello and welcome. So if you'd like to stand so we can see you. We are having lots of visitors these days. That's great. So hold us to it if we don't approach you and we see you have a visitor tag. Si tenemos otros visitantes aquí, podría ponerse de pie. You already did that. Nos gustaría ver quién es. ¿Quién son? No sé. Thank you. And if we have any visitors on Zoom, please type in your name and where you're from so others on Zoom can see that and chat with you later. We do record our Sunday services. Just go to our website, UUFSMA.org, click on Services at the top, and then there'll be a drop down, I believe, that says Previous Services. While you're on the website, you can check our various events sponsored by the membership and information on how to become a member. So we will now have our chalice lighting. And welcome to Andrea Abbott.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to start with some opening words. These are from Marjorie Squire. And then we'll do our chalice lighting. Children all, we come together in faith and hope to find what meaning life holds for us, to laugh and sing with one another, to soothe the wounds of daily life, and to grow together in wisdom and love. And now, wherever we are in the world, whenever we go to any UU church, we can count on the one thing that we all do. We will light our flaming chalice here and in our hearts. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. Let us join our voices together in song, hymn number 112. I don't want to hear anything about how people here don't sing. I have heard you all sing just fine.
And do you sing?
I do.
Well, stay up here with me to sing it.
Well, thank you.
All right.
In the shower, I say.
please? We forgot to remind you.
Oh,
¿Dónde está Jerome? Okay. Aquí estás. Okay. So you are remaining standing to share in our unique covenant. I will read it first in English, and Jerome will then read it in Spanish. Let me find this for you. Okay, thank you. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que se beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Please be seated. Let's take a breath as we settle to share our joys and concerns. Every week, we light candles for what is in our hearts and minds. The candle we light indicates that that thought, that person is held by all of us here and on Zoom. This is part of being chosen family and weaving community over time. You may email Tom Rosiello, our minister, during the week to be on the list, or fill out a card before service. And if you're on Zoom, you can type your concern or joy into chat. Our first candle is to send healing thoughts and love to Jean Marie Stein, who fell and broke her hip this past week. She had surgery on Wednesday and is doing well. And I know that Frankie is grateful for all of the contributions that people have been making, as in walkers, etc. Our next candle is one of support for all of those who are dealing with a difficult diagnosis or the challenges of aging. And we have a card of joy from Ann Geyer, who reports that her little granddaughter, Nayeli, who was recently dedicated in a naming ceremony in this sanctuary, turned 1 year old last week. And now we turn from this community to our larger human family. We light a candle to mourn and not let ourselves be inured to yet another mass shooting in the United States this week. Once again, we light our blue and yellow candle in caring for all the people, civilians and soldiers on both sides, suffering from the war in Ukraine. And we have a number of cards of concern for Navalny's death, sympathy for his family, joy for his inspiration, resilience, fueling hope. And this next candle is for a personal concern which intersects with concern for rising authoritarianism in Russia and our fears for it in the United States in the future. On December, I lit a candle of joy for our friend, who's a Russian dissident, Boris Kargalitsky, when he was released after 6 months in detention waiting for trial for criticizing the Russian war in Ukraine. Well, this week, the prosecution won their appeal in a military court, and Boris was sentenced to 5 years in a penal colony, and he was suddenly taken into custody in the courtroom. So despite being sad, I wish for us his strength. He posted right after that, "I am in a great mood, as always. Anyway, see you soon. We just need to live a little longer and survive this dark period in our country." Close quote. We light our red candle as we hold in our hearts all suffering that the ongoing horror in the Middle East is causing, both the Israelis killed on October 7th or held hostage, and the Palestinians struggling to survive, especially the children. May we draw strength from this community to tolerate the pain that comes with our compassion for our brothers and sisters in the Middle East, so that we don't become paralyzed by cynicism or numbing, but can look for what we have power to do. And now, a candle and a moment of silence for all those here who are holding unspoken names and situations in their hearts. We hold all these things in the great care we have for one another. Now, during our musical meditation, you may come forward to silently light a candle for what you bring today.
Cathy and I will share with you a responsive reading. I think it's blue and purple on the screen. When it comes up, there we go, good. It is called Forgive Us by Vivian Pomeroy. I'll read the English and Spanish in blue. Cathy will read the English and Spanish in purple, and that's the responsive part. Forgive us that often we forgive ourselves so easily and others so hardly. Perdónanos que a menudo nos perdonamos a nosotros mismos tan fácilmente y a los demás tan difícilmente.
Forgive us that we expect perfection from those to whom we show none. Perdónanos por esperar la perfección de aquellos a quienes no mostramos ninguna.
Forgive us for repelling people by the way we set a good example. Perdónanos por repeler a la gente por la forma en que damos un buen ejemplo.
Forgive us the folly of trying to improve a friend. Perdónanos la locura de intentar mejorar a un amigo.
Forbid that we should use our little idea of goodness as a spear to wound those who are different. Prohíbe el que utilicemos nuestra pequeña idea de la bondad como lanza para herir a los que son diferentes.
Forbid that we should feel superior to others when we are only more shielded. Prohibir que nos sintamos superiores a los demás cuando solo estamos más protegidos.
And may we encourage the secret struggle of every person y que alentemos la lucha secreta de cada persona. Thank you. And I would like to invite our guest minister, Andrea Abbott, for our main sermon. Thank you.
Well, again, good morning. First would like to start by thanking you for inviting me back. It's always wonderful to be here, and we're so glad to be here, but that's what everyone says, right? I don't run into anyone who doesn't say, tried to sell me on the virtues of San Miguel de Allende, like I needed selling. Now, we're here from Central New York State, and I recently read in The Guardian a piece in which there was a concern for the mental health of those of us who live near the Great Lakes. Now, when the British are concerned about the mental health of those of us who live in a cloudy area, you know you got concerns. But here we know it's always sunny in San Miguel. Somehow, by some magic, even when it's overcast, even when it's what you guys call cold, you have no idea, it's still always sunny and warm in San Miguel, and particularly here in this congregation. This congregation is always an inspiration to me, with your concern for each other in the community of this congregation, and your concern and care for those in the community around you. I tell so many people about you, about your kindness, generosity, and especially your acute sense of social justice. You are, to me, the communion of saints. So the title of my sermon is Thinking Differently, and it's about neurodiversity. And it came about as a result last year of a conversation I had with Joyce Grevel. I don't know if she's here or not. If she is, I hope she goes, waves her hand around or something. But so many thoughts come during all the wonderful conversations we have had here. But at the outset, I'd like to let you know that this is a more personal talk or sermon or whatever everybody calls it than what I usually give. Having a pulpit to speak from is a privilege, and one I don't want to misuse by only highlighting my own concerns. However, though my family is directly affected by autism, a quick read and talking to many people reveals that many people are affected by this. And so here I am. Our grandson, Elias, is almost 9. He doesn't read yet. He struggles with very basic math. His syntax is often jumbled, and so it can be very hard to understand him when he speaks. He has a lot of fears. And when he is upset, his meltdowns are epic. Elias has autism. That last sentence, Elias has autism, is actually contentious. There are those in the autism community, usually those often called high functioning, who would say that autism is who they are and that autism is a gift, not a disorder, and that the sentence should be, Elias is autistic. However, the use of the sentence, Elias has autism, reflects another group who say that autism is not the whole of who they are or who their loved ones are. And it's meant to mirror the way we talk about physical disease, that we should say someone has cancer, not that someone is cancerous. This is the same argument that has been used for other mental disorders, such as schizophrenia. Some would say that those who are so affected are schizophrenic, versus those who would say they have schizophrenia. So try some of these out on your tongue. Elias is autistic. Elias has autism. And see how you feel about the differences. Do your minds feel differently when you change the wording? Because minds are what we're talking about here. What minds are valued, what are devalued, what happens to the devalued, and how does this understanding help us to see ourselves? Those of us whom the newish movement called neurodiversity would call neurotypical. I also want to quote something that I've heard about autism. It says, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Elias's constellation of behaviors are his, not necessarily those of someone else who is also called autistic, just like the diversity of those of us who might be called neurotypical. But not all of us here are neurotypical. Some of us may have a diagnosis generated by a recognized psychological test. Some may have self-diagnosed. And to complicate that picture, definitions about autism have also changed. The broadening of the definition of autism is also something that is controversial, but somewhat simplistically, let me give you this definition to start. Autism is not a single entity, but a spectrum, a range of behaviors that cluster around social communication and social interaction. The restrictive and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. These are the behaviors that tick the boxes of those professionals who diagnose autism. and our grandson ticked enough boxes so that he is considered moderately autistic. Statistically, 1 in 36 children, predominantly boys, though that is changing as the definition of autism is broadened and as people look at the fact that girls are so often different. But 1 in 36 children right now are diagnosed with autism. For contrast, in 2000, 1 in 150 children were so labeled. So something's going on here. Most think the broadened diagnosis accounts for the huge rise in autism. That makes a lot of sense, but it begs a couple of questions. What was happening to broaden that diagnosis? And what was going on for those people, excuse me, who weren't so labeled? The missing 116 that were not considered autistic in 2000. The second question may be partially answered by this number. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that over 5.4 million adults, 2.21% of the population, have autistic spectrum disorder. That's a huge demographic. For those of you organizers, just think what that would be like if they all voted Democratic. But what's happening with and to all these people, diagnosed and undiagnosed? If it's a huge demographic, it's also a huge range in behaviors and abilities. When we're talking about autism, we're talking about people who may be doing rewarding and well-recompensed work, or we may be talking about people who require total care. Our grandson is somewhere in the middle of this range, and only time and as much help as we can get him will tell what kind of a life he will have. Speaking of help, in addition to other controversies, and boy, there is nothing in this world that cannot generate controversy, I have discovered, there is also a good deal of dissent from those concerned with autism as to what that help should be. One current therapy is called Applied Behavioral Analysis, ABA. According to a description from the Autism Speaks website, the goal of ABA therapy is to increase behaviors that are helpful and decrease behaviors that are harmful or affect learning. Many in the autism community have objected to this therapy because it seems coercive. I've heard people describe it as fascistic. It forces those with autism to question their natural responses and stigmatizes them. It forces them into mainstream society and treats autism as a deviant condition. Many with autism have come to see themselves as a community, somewhat like the deaf community, which we will see here, and a community that has a contribution to make to mainstream society. A therapy that works to integrate those with autism into mainstream society implicitly denies the worth of that community. This approach says that people with autism must adapt to our culture. And then, of course, our dominant culture becomes the unquestioned norm. This poses some practical and ethical conundrums for our family. Our grandson receives some therapy every other week. This was the best we could get in central New York, which suffers from a real dearth of therapeutic professionals. But we know and trust his therapist. She was my husband's colleague for many years. She has helped us, given us advice about how to live with our grandson, because he does live with us, and how to help him thrive. She uses some ABA therapy along with other modalities in working with him. And so far, his school has been wonderfully supportive of him. But we still face the fact that he does not read and cannot do basic math, and people struggle to understand him. I would support almost any system that would teach him to do these things, that would open the world of books and logic and communication to him. He has strengths. He is a good artist, and he's a very willing worker around our house. He loves to take out the garbage. He loves to start the dishwasher. I have to remember not to do it, or I am in severe trouble. But how much will the world have to change before we sleep better at night when we think about his future? How much will the world have to change before he can have a life of worth and dignity? Worth and dignity. Our first principle is that we affirm each person has worth and dignity. But how does that actually work out in daily life? Autism and other conditions that affect the brain have been called neurodiversity. Those who think differently, whose minds are different from the norm, form a large and varied group. I might even say most of us here. Who in this group finds acceptance in the wider society? What does our culture value? What does it reward? For me, the first and most obvious way in which worth and dignity are not evenly spread is the role that formal education plays in deciding who is worthy of that respect and who is not. Besides inheriting great wealth, a topic to be explored another time, the one way in which people advance their standing in this culture is through the educational system. And I'm sure I could call for a show of hands, and I will begin with my own, of those of us who have escaped some system or another because we were good in school. Come on, everybody, stick those hands up. Okay. Who found college the way out of some situation? Indeed, a lot of effort by people concerned with social justice, especially those in this room, has involved opening that system to more and more groups of people. Many of us can remember the fight to end segregation in colleges. Many of us can remember the fight to admit women to men's exclusive Ivy League schools. Many of us can remember the efforts to make higher education available to those without the means to pay for school, and that still goes on, especially in this group. We remember the efforts to make buildings accessible to those with physical disabilities. But what happens when a person's disability or different ability does not allow them to learn in the same way others do, does not allow them to be admitted to that route out? Whenever I turn on a light bulb, use my computer, think about the advances in medicine, I am grateful for our educational system. But oh, wait, all those things have been developed or advanced by people who were neurodiverse. Edison, Gates, McClintock, and of course everyone at this point choruses Einstein. All of them are now considered to have been autistic. Many other people considered autistic have enriched our world. There are advantages to thinking laterally, to following a different path, to seeing the dominant culture from outside it. So many ways in which we need alternative visions, and visions are most truly alternative when they are lived. that to force change upon people rather than to work with their strengths would deprive us all of irreplaceable knowledge. However, what I have just said only applies to a subset of autistic people, those who have the mental apparatus that enables them to make their mark in the world, those with the talent that fits into what is considered necessary or desirable. They are able to make invaluable contributions despite not being what others might call normal. They may be awkward to have at a dinner party, but their accomplishments override social niceties. I'd also like to have us note that the stereotype of the autistic person preferring isolation is not true. There is research that heartbreakingly says that autistic people yearn for attachments and relationships. They are bewildered and hurt by the isolation imposed on them by others. But this has become the new stereotype, and boy, it doesn't take us long to make stereotypes. The brilliant, obsessed, and socially inept subject of novels and films whose mind is a logic machine. He, and in this realm almost always his, social blunders generate comedy while his abilities inspire awe. Unfortunately, there is no law of nature that automatically provides compensation for disorders. There is no divine recompense that automatically kicks in to give extraordinary abilities when other abilities are impaired. In the same way that genius is unevenly distributed in the population of the neurotypical, so is it unevenly distributed in those with autism. For many, many people with this, life is a struggle to understand and be understood. Employment rates for adult people with autism may be as low as 20%. This is an incredibly low rate, and who would tolerate this rate if I were to give other groups this statistic? Now, this may reflect the learning disabilities that often, but not always, accompany the autistic spectrum, or it may reflect the value that employers, unconsciously or not, place on conformity to social norms. After all, one of the stumbling blocks to employment is often the interview. At this point, I'm reminded of something that those in the physically disabled community taught me. A disability is a disability only under certain circumstances. If there are cut downs on curbs, if there are ramps, if there are lifts and other devices, someone using a wheelchair is not mobility disabled. But what are the equivalents for mental disabilities? These equivalents are more difficult, perhaps more challenging, to the educational system that has been the entrenched portal to advancement, status, and prestige. What about different ways of learning? What about different ways of developing strengths in people, even if they cannot perform well in what are considered essential learning areas? Is it possible to have different systems of evaluation to discover what people know? Different areas of performance that would then be valued as highly as the usual reading, writing, and arithmetic? Perhaps the rise of incidents of autism may help us to question our own inheritance. Merit has been equated with intelligence for a long, long time. Perhaps we need to take stock of what we have by grace, that old-fashioned word for a gift that is not earned and not by our own efforts. After all, we were not part of the assembly line when our brains were constructed. We may have worked hard, used our gifts to great advantage, given back much to the community, but we didn't create the apparatus, the mind, that we have used to be able to achieve. We have also not seriously questioned the ways in which we measure intelligence, reward some forms of intelligence, foster the use of a certain kind of intelligence. And at this point, I would like to make clear that I'm rather broadening out this discussion to include those who suffer from any intellectual disorder, not just those on the autism spectrum. Merit and status has become so linked to intelligence that we do not see alternatives. Worth and dignity are not evenly spread throughout this society, as financial rewards are also not even remotely spread. And this, as we know, is not getting better. Lack of a certain kind of intelligence dooms many people to poverty, ridicule, incarceration, and other kinds of oppression. Perhaps this is the time to question our conflations of educational attainment, prestige careers, wealth, and other markers of status in order to truly approach worth and dignity for all. Now, speaking of inherited wealth, I'm no fan of Mr. Trump, as anybody who knows me knows. But as the grandmother of a child who requires a lot of help in any academic subject, I have cringed when people called Trump stupid, just as I cringed when Trump mocked the disabled. And then I wondered, is this another example of self-hate? Those in the autism community who are what are now called high-functioning, what perhaps used to be called Asperger's, and I'm not getting into that controversy, have enough difficulty with many of those who are neurotypical. Consider then the difficulties of those who are not able to offer some special talent or ability to the world. In any disability, we see the structure and values of our society exposed, bare as the branches of a tree in a northern winter. Perhaps we can also see where those values have led us. The best and brightest, a phrase which tells us a lot, have not always led us on good trails. Among the number of those considered neurotypical, those that thrive in our current intellectual environment are the heads of oil and gas companies or senior staffers in the Department of Defense. Could this be an argument for diversity of intellect, a case for inclusion that may enrich us as the inclusion of so many other groups have similarly enriched us? What are we losing by not listening to the voices and perspectives of so many people? And what will we have to do to make this inclusion possible? What happens if a person's vision is transmitted through a communication board or through neurotypical interpreters, not through oratory or a well-written essay? There are so many facets to autism that I've only begun to scratch the surface, but we all do want to have lunch. So, I'd like to close with a word about metaphors. I was struck several years ago when more than one author used cancer as a metaphor for our society, cancer with its uncontrollable growth. I have wondered about the rise of the numbers of those on the autistic spectrum as a similar metaphor. Is difficulty in communication somehow a metaphor for our times? Is the isolation that autism is noted for somehow a metaphor for the increase in individualism, the death of communities, for the difficulty many experience in dealing with other human beings? If one lesson of the pandemic was our need for each other, sadly, the other lesson was how much people enjoyed not having to interact with others. A metaphor is, like that famous cigar, just a metaphor. It is not the reality of a life lived on the edges, and yet perhaps it is worth considering. Metaphors contain some reality, or they don't become metaphors. We all want to wake up every morning feeling we are whole and good. We, all of us here, have been living the one great commission that there is, to work until our circle is wider still and truly embrace all the living. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Michael Murphy. I'm a member of our board of directors and was on the social action committee that has been transformed and improved into the Social Justice Foundation. The foundation is continuing to support the 11 NGOs in San Miguel that we have supported for years. The requests for grants from the NGOs are starting to come to the foundation, and the gifts you give to the foundation this month will let us know if we can fully grant the NGOs' requests. I said the foundation is an improvement because it is structured to not only receive our financial support, but later in the year, the foundation will be soliciting funds from the UU fellowships in the US and Canada, and they will also begin to write grant proposals to support our social justice efforts in San Miguel. Before the year is over, the foundation hopes to have 3 sources of revenue to support the needy Mexican community that has so graciously welcomed us to San Miguel. Your generosity is critical to starting the year off in a positive and successful way. All the offerings in February will go to the support of the foundation. One of the NGOs we support helps autistic children, and another helps deaf children. I am the steward for the deaf school, and I'd like to share a quick story with you. Imagine it is 11 years ago, and I am born deaf to a family in the Campo. I cannot communicate with my family, and they cannot communicate with me. There is no money from the state to help me or my family. My parents are very poor, and every day they must go out and find work to get money to feed our family at night. During the day, my brother and sister go to school. If my parents send me to school, the teacher puts me in the corner for the day. Everyone at school thinks I'm stupid. But I'm not stupid. I'm just deaf. If my parents want me to be at home, and I cannot find somebody to look after me, they tie me to a chair or the bed to keep me safe. Imagine my thoughts as I lie there on the bed. 10 years ago, 2 UU members, Sharon and John Doherty, with the help of a couple Rotarians, saw the need to help me and the other deaf children and founded the School for the Deaf in San Miguel. Now, because of them, I go to school, to the deaf school, where I can learn Spanish and sign language, which allows me to communicate with my family and my friends. I also take classes and can graduate from grade school or high school or even college. At the school, I also have the opportunity to learn a trade so that I can earn money and contribute to my family. I can learn jewelry making, woodworking, leatherworking, and sewing. The school is also fun. There is a robotics club where I can learn how to build and program a robot. We have a chess club where we not only learn chess, but compete with other clubs. I can learn judo. And we have a choir where we feel and sign various songs. I want to thank this fellowship for supporting my school. You have given me the opportunity to have a meaningful and productive life. I would like to leave you with a song from our choir. Please, Diego, and the offering now would be gratefully received. Thank you.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one.
I invite us all to join in our closing hymn. If you'd rise if you're willing or able, Alan will help lead us. Words will appear on the screen. Thank you. You can all be seated.
Closing words are by Vincent Zillman. As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learn light our hearts till we return. And now we'll extinguish the chalice. Thanks, Susan. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And please remain seated for the postlude. And thank you, Jerry. It's been wonderful to hear you.